Hey everybody, and welcome once again to Nose in the Book, a Bible reading commentary with me, your host, Pastor Justin Van Reed. Got a little bit of a different background today. I hope it doesn't throw you off. I've been encouraged to try some different backgrounds. I think when the weather gets nicer, I might even go outside and do some of these videos outside. But otherwise, similar format here. We're going to take a quick look at the 4 chapters before us today, which would be Genesis chapter 30, and then Esther chapter 6, and then in the New Testament, we'll take a look here at Mark chapter 1 and Romans chapter 1. So we're starting a couple of new books today, new gospel, the next one after we've finished Matthew, and also our first letter from the Apostle Paul, our first New Testament epistle. So this is going to be great. All right, Genesis 30, first of all, we pick up with the story here of Jacob. And, Jacob got married here, right? Rachel and Leah. He loves Rachel, doesn't love Leah. Only Leah has the first few children. Rachel is barren, unable to have children. And so now as we enter into chapter 30, all I can think of to summarize this chapter is family dysfunction. You have here these 2 wives that Jacob has, and he loves the one, doesn't love the other, but the one he doesn't really like is the one that's giving him children. So then Rachel says, why don't you, come into my servant? And so he has a couple kids with the servant, and then Leah's servant, couple more kids. So now we're up to 8 kids total between the 3 women. And then this really twisted thing happens with Reuben coming in from the field, and it's traded in essence for a night with Jacob and Leah being together. And so Leah gets pregnant again, not kid number 5, kid number 6 for her. And so we're up to 10 total. And then finally at the end of the chapter, the Lord opens the womb of Rachel, and we have child number 11, which is Joseph. But just the way it reads and everything that's going on here, really dysfunctional. And it kind of continues on. The second half of the chapter is how Jacob becomes wealthy. Remember, he's still living with Laban, his uncle, working for him all these years. And now, he wants to leave. And so they come up with this little agreement that Jacob will get all of the speckled and spotted of the flock. So he's going to get basically the damaged, the weaker being the idea here. Laban will get the stronger and more healthy and better quality. And so Laban, he's kind of trying to cheat here by getting all of the good ones out, but then Jacob's kind of cheating back at him with the stuff that he puts in front of the sheep whenever they're mating. And so long story short, it works to Jacob's advantage. So it's almost like Laban and Jacob are really 2 peas of a pod here, but of course they're kind of butting heads, but they're both, trying to take advantage of the other, if you will. And Jacob comes out on top and basically plunders Laban of all of these good sheep. The more and more and more Jacob is going to receive, and less for Laban. So a lot of dysfunction here in what's going on with Jacob and his family in Genesis chapter 30. All right, Esther chapter 6. And this is a wonderful chapter here of the reversal of the fortunes of Mordecai and Haman, right? Haman wants to put all the Jews to death, including Mordecai, especially Mordecai. Mordecai, meanwhile, he's trying to work with Esther to get things turned around here. What happens? The king has a dream and can't sleep, and so he has the books read to him. Nothing like having a little bit of history books read to you to put you back to sleep, but he's actually listening and paying attention. And he hears about how what we learned earlier in Esther, Mordecai reported about the assassins that were going to take Xerxes out, and they save his life. Mordecai saves his life, was never rewarded, right? He said, what happened for this man, or what should happen for him? And he calls Haman in and says, what would you do, for someone like this? And of course, Haman, he's thinking of himself, right? He's going to be honest with you. He's like, hey, I'd have a parade, march him down, Main Street, say, this is the best guy. This is what happens when you honor the king. And so, but of course, the king has in mind Mordecai, not Haman. And just in the sovereign plan of God here, Haman has to lead Mordecai. Remember, Haman just wants to kill Mordecai. He can't stand him. And now Haman has to lead Mordecai on his horse, going down through the main street. Everybody cheering. And Haman has to say, "This is what happens to the one who the king wants to honor." And wow, that must have been so hard for Haman. He goes home and he's distraught. And then, his advisors, his wife, the ones who previously were like, "Hey, let's get this big pole. We're going to, kill Mordecai, put Mordecai on the pole." Now they're like, "Yo, if Mordecai here, he's of the Jewish people, you're not going to be able to stop him. Look at what has happened here." And so again, even though we don't see the name of God appear in the book of Esther, clearly God is at work here behind the scenes, just really orchestrating things and reversing things for Haman and for Mordecai, working things out for the benefit of the Jews rather than their destruction. All right, we turn then to the New Testament, we're finished Matthew, Gospel of Mark, chapter 1. One of the big differences you'll notice between Matthew and Mark, because a lot of people will read Mark and say, I heard this before. It's similar. Matthew and Mark are part of the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. But even more so than Luke, Matthew and Mark have a lot of similarities. They read, a lot of the same stories, same parables, same teachings of Jesus, same miracles. But Mark is significantly shorter than Matthew. Matthew is 28 chapters. Mark is only 16, really 15 and a half chapters long. And so here in the beginning of Mark chapter 1, one of the things that you hear is the quickness in which Jesus moves from thing to thing. Where in Matthew, we got a lot more detail. First of all, we got the birth narratives. Now we don't. But we also got a lot more detail along the way about the things Jesus did and said. Now we're getting a lot more summary, and things just seem to be pushing forward really quickly. So Mark chapter 1, you hear this immediately, and then Jesus did this, and then immediately, and then immediately, and immediately, and he's moving on, and it's really just a summary gospel, if you will, just showing here's what Jesus did, here's what Jesus taught. Now, at times there's going to be even more information than we got in Matthew on things, but for the most part, it's this moving from one thing to the other, not a lot of information, not a lot of comments on it. One of the things you do see here towards the end of the chapter is Jesus get away. There's a lot going on, and Jesus gets away privately early in the morning, and that's important, just as a discipline, as a spiritual discipline, to follow Christ in that and reserving that time to be with God, to spend that time alone with God. Jesus saw this need for himself to spend that time with his Father, and certainly we as his followers need to protect that time as well. All right, then we turn lastly here over to Romans chapter 1. As I said, the first epistle of the Apostle Paul here in the New Testament. And Romans also is 16 chapters, and it's really, really powerful. Many famous passages in this book. We start here in Romans chapter 1, though. Two, I just want to highlight. One, and of course, you have the summary of the gospel, if you will, right? Paul says, "I'm not ashamed of the gospel. It's the power of God unto salvation for both the Jew and the Gentile." And then he has this great statement that the righteous shall live by faith. He's quoting from Habakkuk. And so this becomes Martin Luther's really his cry here for the Reformation and for getting back to the gospel, that the righteous live not by works, but by faith. The righteous will live by faith. And then in the last half of the book of Romans here, verses 18 down to the end of the chapter, you have Paul beginning to set up his argument here of how all are guilty. This is going to continue for a couple chapters, but here he starts it off, sets it up that all are guilty. And he starts off here with how everyone should have a knowledge of God. Even Gentiles who have no word of God should have a knowledge of God because of what has been made. They see in creation what God has created, but instead they suppress the truth, even though they are aware that there is this creator God out there. Instead, they trade that truth for all kinds of idols, and you can see how that has happened throughout the world, throughout history. They, instead of worshiping God as God, they trade that for worshiping man and all sorts of created things, and then fall into sin, and sin upon sin. God gives them up. God gives them over, it says several times, to the further and further sin. And so it's just evident of what the rejection of God, denial of God, and replacement of God leads to. And it's just this further and further down this hole to show everyone is guilty, no one is righteous, where Paul is ultimately going. So in the first few chapters here, Romans, he's starting off showing the guilt of the Gentiles, and then he's going to go into the guilt of the Jews, and then summarize chapter 3 that all are guilty. So that's where we're headed. All right, hope you enjoyed the readings for today. Again, we had Genesis 30, Esther chapter 6, Mark chapter 1, and Romans chapter 1. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in the comments below. Otherwise, keep your eyes on the Lord and your nose in the book. See you again soon.